experience we've been talking about. Can anybody remember which ones we've been talking about?
Patience.
Yeah, those ones. Tonight, we're going to talk about self-control. As most people that have been doing the talks have said, we've kind of picked ones that where it's stuff we can't either do or have struggled with, and self-control was the one I picked. Mick Jagger once said it's all right letting yourself go as long as you can get yourself back. And the trouble is often we can't. We often let ourselves go and we go beyond the point of gaining satisfaction and then kind of turn into a little bit of a spiral downwards, and because we go, well, just one more, you know, when it's like a, I don't know, bag of crisps, sharing bag, family bag, and it's like, just one more, just one more, just because I like the taste. It's not because I'm hungry, it's just because I like the taste. So, what I'd like to do in the groups you're in is, it does work, discuss what does self-control mean and what are the words you would associate with self-control, i.e. is it being restrained, suppressing emotions, does it make you a boring person? If you have lots of self-control, i.e. do you become so controlled that you are boring? So just give you 5 minutes just to talk about what you think it means and what you associate with self-control. Positive and negative things. Don't just think of it as a negative thing. Self-control can be a positive thing. So think about negatives and positives. What do we think self-control means?
Going crazy.
Going crazy. Or not going crazy.
Knowing your boundaries.
Knowing your boundaries. What kind of other words did anybody come with that we associate with self-control?
Love. Boring.
Boring. Boring's up there. Any positive things? Balance.
Also certainty.
So there are positive things that can come from self-control. So obviously, as we're talking about fruits of the spirit, fruit is a good thing, fruits are nice. So the whole point is that self-control, whereas we think of it, can be a restrictive thing and about holding back. It can actually be about a positive thing about moving forwards and growing. So the definition of self-control is the control or restraint of one's actions or emotions. So it is the restraint of something, but by holding something back you can push yourself forward. It's a weird bit of logic, but it does work. So the fruit of self-control is not just about containing negative behaviours, but it's about unleashing sort of courageous ones. Unfortunately we tend to contain the courageous stuff and only unleash negative things, like when I open a bag of giant crisps, I can't stop eating them, and so forth, because I don't have a lot of self-control. And we often react to things in different ways, like when I open a bag of giant crisps, I have to eat them all. There's no choice in it. In my subconscious, there's no choice. They have to be eaten. The bag is now open. They will be spoiled by the end of the evening or the next morning if they are not consumed, despite the fact they can be wrapped up, airtight, and contained for weeks. But no, they have to be eaten. So we automatically react in certain ways when stuff happens, according to the way things have happened in the past. So it's kind of habits we've created. And formed over, while we've been growing up, and it might just be the way that things were done at home when you was a kid growing up, and it just becomes an automatic habit, and that's where it can come from. So I'm going to play you a little clip.
Maybe if you look inside yourself, the person you should be most angry at is you. How have you been feeling? Any more control issues?
In control.
Good. Excellent.
It's me. Kermit, we're having a meeting here, man. You're being really rude, Frog.
Pardon us, please. Animal, I need to talk to you for a second.
We're getting the Muppets back together. We need you to drum again.
Animal drum?
Yes.
Please, sir.
Drum! 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 Control. I'm Animal's court-appointed sponsor. We don't use the D-R-U-M word.
It's his trigger word.
His trigger word?
Excuse me, Mr. Black, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but it's very important to these guys that they get their drum.
It's my trigger word, too.
Chuck, we talked about this on Tuesday.
Tuesday's another one of my trigger words!
I think so! Sorry.
Let's go, Animal. Go, Animal, be free, man! But remember, no drama!
So Animal kind of lost control and he had to go to anger management class because he kind of became an insane idiot when people told him to drum. And it became, that was his trigger word, as I said. And he had to, so he learned to be in control of himself whenever he was presented with his trigger. If you know that you have certain things where you lose your self-control, just think about them while we're talking this evening, and just try and think if you can identify what the trigger is. Like I say, for me, it's usually having the bag of crisps in the house at all is usually the trigger. So not buying the bag of crisps is usually the way to stop the trigger. So just think about this evening, about that, about what your areas of self-control are, where you lack or have too much self-control, and try and think about what the triggers are. Because by the end of the evening, it would be really cool if you could work towards realising what they are. Because sometimes we don't even know what the trigger is. So, how can we actually grow this fruit? And there are 4 ways that we can do this. The first is to be persuaded and work, which is work on our beliefs. And 1 Peter 13 says, prepare your minds for action and be self-controlled. There are a few other scriptures that go along with that, and there's one from Philippians 3:21, everything under his control. John 5 verse 19 says the devil is not in ultimate control but resists those seeking the kingdom of God, because God has ultimate control. The devil never actually has control over you. He will try and resist you, he will try and stop what you're trying to grow your spirits. He will never have control of those fruits in your life. God has the ultimate control. So don't ever think that, you know, you've lost and there's no sort of turning things around. God is always in ultimate control, and you can always let him have that control. Romans 7 verse 5 says, actually, lack of self-control makes us miserable. I am really bad with cash. If I have cash on me, I will spend it. And I will spend it on rubbish. Doesn't matter what it is, I will spend it. Because it's something in me says, and it's usually sausage rolls. At work, I used to spend an absolute, before I was married, here's an advertisement for getting married, because it's really good for your health. Before I was married, I never used to make myself a lunch for work. I used to go to work and I'd have cash on me because I used to just go to the cash machine, as you do, get some money out, need a bit of money this week. And I would spend, I don't know, between £5 and £10 a day just on rubbish. Whether it was McDonald's, going into Oliver Adams, and it was just like, I'll have a sausage roll, please. And a cream cake. Or one of those little pizzas look nice actually. I'll have those. So and by the end of it, I've just spent an inordinate amount of money. So I quickly realised that, and at the time, so I spent the cash. I have the cash at whatever £10, and I go away and eat my food. My food is really yummy because obviously Oliver Adams is, and McDonald's is really yummy, despite what people say. And I feel great. Until about 5 minutes after I've eaten it, and I feel like I've eaten too much, and I then feel miserable because I've spent my money when I could have not spent it, and I could have made myself a sandwich at home for about 50p, because of local bread costs and whatever, and all the fillings. So that's what happened when I got married. I stopped spending money because my wife makes me lunch. It's fantastic. But actually before that, I realised it was a problem, and I realised that the trigger was the fact that I carried cash. So what I did to stop myself wasting money on food I didn't need is I stopped carrying cash around with me, and instantly I was hungry for a few weeks, fair enough, I starved. But ultimately, I stopped wasting money. I stopped spending £50 a week on lunch, which was just a ridiculous, and just filling myself up with stuff I didn't need, pastry and cream cakes and stuff. It's all very good, but so short term I'm really happy, but in the long term it made me really miserable because I felt bad for spending all the money. So I had to find the trigger. I had to find the bad thing was I carried cash. I had to cut that out. I had to stop carrying cash, and since then, fantastic. There is unfortunately now the fact that you can use a debit card just about anywhere for as little as a penny, which is quite bad. But I'm less inclined to use it because I have this worry that I can't see what's in my account, so I don't know what I'm spending. So it is okay. It's just when I've got cash, I'm really bad. The second thing, kind of leads on nicely, is be proactive. Engage and anticipate challenges. So again, self-control by understanding yourself. So you need to learn about who you are and what triggers stuff off. So the first stage of kind of how to deal with stuff is to learn where the triggers are and be proactive about it. Learn about yourself. Techniques that sort of like parents use when they see children about to have a tantrum to stop them triggering off is they will distract them with something else, another activity or something like that. Anger management trainers ask patients to imagine stop and think road signs as soon as they get angry. Self-reinforcement, not shielding ourselves from negative consequences of our actions, but fully enjoying positive ones. So like, instead of thinking, oh, I'm hungry, I would really like to buy a sausage roll right now, wouldn't that be so nice? I think yes, but on the upside, not spending the money, it's in the bank, spend it on beer at the end of the month. Bonus. And then the cycle starts again, but with beer. Oh dear, which actually sounds worse than I just thought. Okay. So be proactive. Think about practical. So think about sort of practical ways. Like I said, for me, it's not carrying cash. It could be as small a thing as that, and it can really transform an area of your life by just doing one small practical thing. So this isn't massively deep, holy stuff yet. We will get there, hopefully. But at the moment, just really small practical things you can do to just make your life and grow this, make your life better and grow this fruit. Discuss how you identify your self-control issues and how do you monitor them. How do you keep track? Okay. The next thing we can do is be personal and stay alert to temptation. 1 Peter 5 verse 8 says, be self-controlled and alert. If your enemy prowls to devour. And this is where we really need to kind of be fully aware of what our triggers are. They're our temptations. And that's when we need to really start to decipher how we can either prevent the triggers, or at least, if we can't prevent them, because sometimes they can be things out of our control, is at least how to deal with them. I don't know. I mean, if it's something, for example, where something happens, you do something that you don't like, the fact you do it, and it's all because it's triggered by the fact that you're on your own, try and hang around with friends. Try not to be in a place where you're on your own. Might be something. For me, one of my kind of big areas and issues I've had to deal with over the last few years, well, quite a long while growing up, is I got really hurt by my family growing up, by my mum and grandparents, and without going into it, what it basically led to was I would I would lose control of how much I am in control of the situation. As in, what I would do is, if something bad is happening or a big change is happening in my life, I will go into this automatic habit thing, like I mentioned about earlier. My brain kicks into gear and it goes into an autopilot, and I just try to list in my head and put into action as many ways as I possibly, humanly and unhumanly can, to control the situation. I had and still do from time to time, it's kind of an ongoing thing, really big issues with not being in control, and real fear of not being in control, and it's how I would lose my self-control. I would go beyond what a normal person would do to control the situation, and I would do everything I possibly could. I would lay awake at night to think about ways I could manipulate a situation so that it was okay for me, and all kinds of things. And all that stemmed from kind of the hurt I had from my family. Because I would have this fear of being hurt again, so the way I would deal with it was I'd lose control and try to control everything as I possibly can. And that was kind of the downside of the whole thing, really, losing control of how much I control stuff. And that's something where I had to really let God deal with that with me. I kind of had to let that, give that to him. I had to really let him heal me of that hurt, and that was the only way that was ever going to go away, and still in the process of. On the positive side, because we are trying not to think of self-control as being a negative thing or to do with negative things. On the positive side, out of it, because I would make lists in my head and be very organised, and I would put my plan into action. It works fantastic for work for me. I'm a carpenter, working property maintenance. On the upside of that, I can use that needs to control stuff for a positive use, whereas I can make lists of how I need to prioritise my work, how best to be efficient about it, and then to put that into action. So that was kind of the positive thing actually I can take away from it, is the fact that when I feel this need to control stuff, because I tend to work on my own a lot of the time, so I really do need to be on top of what how efficient I'm being, because I only have myself most of the time to keep track of my progress. And so that's kind of the good side of my need to control stuff. Is at work, it's fantastic, so I'm hopefully most of the time really efficient and get what's done. But it's still taking kind of God to work in me and get to that point where it's a good thing and it's not such a bad thing. Like I say, sometimes particularly at the moment, when stuff changes in life, it kind of sort of triggers off again, and I have to keep myself in check. I just have to realise that I'm doing it, because sometimes the problem is you fall into doing, like I say, it's a habit, you fall into the habit without realising. So part of it's just being aware, staying alert to what's going on. The fourth thing that we can do is be prayerful, receive the Holy Spirit. 1 Peter 4 says, be clear-minded and self-controlled so that you can pray. Romans 8 verse 9 says, you however are controlled by the Spirit, if the Spirit of God lives in you. Our degree of self-control is linked by design to the quality of our prayer life. Involving God in what we're doing is, as we know, a key part of our Christian faith. If God's not in it, we're not likely to succeed. So including God in growing all these fruits is really vital to how fruitful they're going to be. So staying in relationship with God, we can become more tuned to his voice, and we can become wiser in what we need to apply to our self-control, where we need to apply it and when we need to apply it. So keeping that connection to God open and letting him speak to us, and he can help us to realise what those triggers are and how to deal with them. So Patrol, remember, be persuaded, be proactive, be personal, and be prayerful. My top tips for this, I tried to think of things that I would say, is to identify the triggers. So where does it start? What's the root of the problem? Because like all things, you have to kill them at the root. As you know, just pull the weed out, pull the leaves off the weed, it comes back, you've got to kill it at the root. Rocky's got his head in his hands, because probably just make anything will work. But you do. You have to eradicate something, you have to kill it at the root, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's, you know, a thing you've got with eating, or, I don't know, whatever, drinking, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've got to identify the root of the problem, what the trigger is, and deal with it there. Be practical about it. So if it's something, like I say, for me, it's not carrying cash. Talk to God, because God's the one who knows everything and can really help us in those areas. Talk to a friend. You might want to confide with someone. You know, be open and honest about what your triggers are, what the things you struggle with. Because that's kind of, I don't know whether it came up, but it's kind of a way that we can monitor these things, is by having somebody, you can say, look, to your friends, say, look, can you just keep checking up on me? Do you mind just asking me how I'm getting on with whatever, such and such? And, you know, even if it's just sort of once a week, you know, somebody says, how are you getting on with that issue? And and if you feel you can do that with somebody, that's fantastic. And if you feel that they can be, it's got to be somebody who's going to be honest with you, and you've got to be open to receiving that honesty. Because there's no point in telling someone about something and then either one, lying to them when they ask you, how are you getting on, and you say fantastic, and you actually know you've really had a really bad week. So lying to them's not going to work, and that makes the whole thing pointless. The second thing is, if you're honest with them and they tell you something they tell you something you don't like the sound of, you need to be open to receive that. You know, the person involved needs to be doing it in a very loving way, and a very, you know, constructive criticism. It's got to be. It's, you know, can't be a friend that's just going to put you down. But still, if they're going to say something honest that you don't like, you need to be prepared to accept that and learn from it. And of course, read the Bible. You know, read about people who have struggled with all manner of things in the Bible. I'm sure there's somebody in there you can identify with their struggles, and you can learn from that always. So, be like Animal, in control. He's the man.
You look so happy.
He's in control. He's in control of his issues. He's just playing the triangle rather than a drum set. That's kind of the end of what I want to say. But what I want us to do now...
It's a t-shirt on purpose.
My t-shirt. Kind of. I did put it on this evening thinking about what it says. This is my do anything and get away with it t-shirt. Unfortunately, it doesn't always apply to life. I don't always get what I want, and I don't always get away with it. Like when I have a sausage roll when I shouldn't. I can't lie to my wife.
Separate savings account.
You have to have money in the savings account first, and so unfortunately,
Pension scheme.
What I'd like us to do now is just close our eyes. We're just going to kind of move into a time of prayer. We're going to listen to just a song, just for you to give people some space. Because like I said, hopefully you've been thinking about what your triggers are, where your self-control issues lie, and hopefully from tonight forward, you and maybe friends, together with God, we can start to make plans on how to move forward. You might want to think about maybe tonight you thought hasn't touched with where you are at the moment. Maybe you want to think back to a talk you heard over this series about another fruit of the Spirit, and you want to just dwell on that. That's okay. If it's anything else, just use this time over the next few minutes, and then just keep your eyes closed when this song stops, and just do a bit of prayer. just pray that what people have shared with you this evening, that you've let them know that you've heard them, that they're not alone. And just pray that people would feel courageous this time, moving forward in those things they've shared with you. And if they feel the need to share them with other people, that they feel they can do that. Father, as we go from this place tonight, we can leave feeling that we've moved a step forward in our walk with you. And just let people know that there's always a way forward, even when it feels like there isn't. Father, just bless everyone that's here this evening, and those who aren't here that would normally be. Father, whatever anybody's trouble with this evening, just pray that you'd be in those situations, you bring healing where it's required. Your will would be done in situations, circumstances, whether it be work, family, home life, external things from hobbies people do, voluntary work. Just be with everybody in those things, Lord. Amen. Just one last thing before I finish, very quickly. When I say be courageous or have courage, people often say, oh, that person's really courageous, that person's got courage, I don't have any courage. Just remember that courage is not the absence of fear, but is moving on forward through our situations regardless of fear. So if you're scared, you're fearful, and you want to be courageous, you can be.
The healing has begun. Oh.